I'm Pickle the satyr. A satyr is a goat boy. Imagine your story.
Hello, my name is John Eppler. I am the director of Tattershall Tulsa, an affiliate of the Tattershall School of Defense. Along with the longsword, the contemporary weapon that was probably more common for the average fighter was the sword and buckler. Longsword was predominantly a knightly weapon at the time. You would see more common troops armed with the sword and buckler. You would see college students with the sword and buckler. The term in the movies you keep hearing, swashbuckler, was not Errol Flynn. It was not some dude wearing tights and a lace shirt. It was a college student walking around looking for trouble. And they liked to fight with sword and bucklers. If they killed somebody, they would be given one benefit of clergy, be branded on the thumb, they'd have one free death to their name, and if they killed anybody else doing it, would be handed over to the secular authorities, because at the time people attending the university had the benefit of clergy. They were lay clergy. During the 100 Years' War, many of your archers would be armed with this as a backup weapon. They would be predominantly relying on their longbows to kill enemy knights, but when things got a little closer and more personal, they would default to the sword and buckler. There are two prevalent systems of medieval sword and buckler we're familiar with. MS-133, which is considered to be the oldest known book on fighting, and what are called the Liegenitzer plays in the German tradition. I do more with the Liegenitzer plays than 133. The common thing between Liegenitzer and 133 is that the weapon is an arming sword. It's a knightly one-handed sword with minimal crossguard protection, relying on a buckler to provide protection. Because the guard is not developed, many of the actions, travel is very much the common fighting method of its day. This is what anybody who was not necessarily trained by professional men-at-arms, this is the weapon they would probably be most familiar with. Later on, the longsword becomes more prevalent across social strata, but right about 1300, this would be your middle-class weapon. Actions in fighting are going to cover, track with the buckler to cover the hand. There are actions in the system where you'll see it used at the half sword, or there are even actions where you're disarming your opponent, not just use it as a weapon where it's blade on blade dueling. It's a very complete weapon. Points about MS-133 is that besides being the earliest manual on fighting, it also shows possibly the earliest known illustration of a female fighter being trained, Walpurgis. As we move out of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, we see a weapon developed we call, in modern terms, the side sword. It is not as long as the later rapier, and it is not as short as the arming sword. It also has a very developed guard. It has knuckle bow, forward rings. This, in contrast to the previous arming sword, has a lot going for it. As a single weapon, I'm able to keep it out in front of me because I have hand protection. When I fight with the sword and buckler with it, I'm able to disconnect myself from the buckler for defense because I can rely on the weapon to provide me more defense than I would get with the arming sword. This is a transitional weapon. It begins commonly used with the buckler, begins commonly used with the cloak. As time progresses, the blades begin to get narrower, and as the fighting style progresses, we move into fighting sword and dagger. Still a great deal of cutting, but the person's able to block with the dagger to make defense. They're able to block with the sword, attack with the dagger. So the fighting becomes much more dynamic. This is an important point in the development of swordplay, however, because the buckler is still useful on the battlefield. The use of the dagger with the sword, while it can be done, does not provide the same amount of cover. This is symptomatic of the rising middle class. They are often richer than the nobles around them. They want to look like the nobles around them. They're carrying swords. They're dueling. They're fighting their neighbors. and in one-on-one combat, if I have the killing of my neighbor in mind, the sword and the dagger is not a bad combination. It is very aggressive. Imagine your story at the Tulsa City County Library. I'll see you at the King's Medieval Fair in Glenpool, Oklahoma.
I'm Pickle the Sayer, and I'll see you next time.